Good afternoon. I'm just going to wait just a second. Oh, there I see I am confirmed that I am live before I get started. So welcome to Identity Theft and Scams. My name is Jamie Owen. I'm one of the attorneys at Student Legal Services. And we're going to start talking about identity theft and then go into scams, but a few housekeeping things first. This is as part of Leadership Week for Lead Scholars. So thanks to them for having us as part of their presentations this week. We appreciate them. Also down in the description box, I do have a survey link. We ask that students take that. I'd appreciate it. And it also gives you the opportunity to put in if someone needs to know you're here. Like I know Lead Scholars just has you take a screenshot, but just in case, if you want to put it in there that you attended, so that I know, because I have no idea who's here at this time. And then we will, I'll be taking that link down afterwards, because this will go up on our YouTube page for you guys to watch at another time if you care to do so. And stuff like that. And I also can take questions. You might see me kind of looking around a little bit because I will be looking at my other screen to see the chat. So if there is anyone who has any questions as I'm going forward, feel free to type them in there and I will periodically take a look over there and hopefully be able to answer them for you. Oh, let me get started here. So first things first, if you don't know what Student Legal Services is, we are a free law office essentially for students. So as long as you're enrolled in classes, you can come to see us for a variety of issues. That includes landlord-tenant matters, reviewing leases before you sign them, simple wills, criminal matters, name changes, bankruptcy. I forget the list sometimes, but it's a whole bunch of stuff. And we always encourage you that if you're not sure, please contact us. If it's not us, we definitely will go ahead and try to point you in the right direction, whether it's another resource on campus or out in the community. We don't handle claims against other students or against the university, some income producing matters and stuff like that. It's just beyond the field of our expertise. And, there's a few specialized areas of law that we also do not handle. So for identity theft, I think we hear a lot about identity theft, but from my experience, it kind of isn't something that we see a ton of with UCF students, but we will go ahead and let you know what we do see. And really, the way that we see it, identity theft comes in two forms. So someone uses your information to pretend to be you. I think that's kind of traditionally what we think of as identity theft. And that could be family or people data breaches, lots of info is out there to be sold about you, all in all sorts of dark corners of the internet. And then, if you're not careful with your own information. But what we more commonly see is someone uses your financial information, like your credit card number, to make purchases. And that's kind of the identity theft that happens most often. It's happened to me more than once. It just kind of is something that happens this day and age, and that could come from skimmers or data breaches, all sorts of things. So what do we see? Most common, like I said, is someone's credit card or debit card being used in an unauthorized manner. So usually some sort of charges to your card, gas, someone having fun in Australia, like with my card one time. And so that's kind of what we'll see. Occasionally we'll see something like someone use your card to go to an ATM. And those are trickier cases because presumably they needed your PIN, and then how they get your PIN is not as easy as just having a skimmer. So we generally say try not to use your PIN in public if you can. And really the best thing to do in this case is to check your report, your statements often. I tend to check my bank account 4 times a week or so, kind of log in, make sure everything is what I think it is and is good. And if there's something on there I don't recognize, then I report it. And then one of the things we sadly sometimes see is parents or family members using someone's info. So sometimes students experience this. It's not great, but maybe a family member open a cell phone, in your name, and otherwise misappropriated your info. We don't usually see strangers doing it. It's just not what we see. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It certainly does. But we don't see that. And then on a rare occasion, we have seen instances where someone files a tax return using your information before you get a chance to do so. So those are kind of the main sorts of things that we see in our office. We don't see everything. There's 70,000 of you guys and 4 of us, but that's kind of the things we most commonly see. So here's some tips to protect yourself and pay with a credit card if you can use one responsibly. The reason we say that is because this is what happens most often is that you swipe your debit card at a store and they get hacked, and then someone uses that debit card number to make a purchase. Well, when it's your debit card, it's linked to your checking account and that money is gone. And yes, if you timely make a report, the bank will credit it back, but that does take some time. So that can be really tough if rent's coming due, or you have a bill or something else you need to pay. I know when I was a student, and even sometimes now, I didn't exactly have a lot of extra money in my account, so that really could have put me into a bind. Whereas with a credit card, when you use it, it's like theoretical money you have to pay, right? So the charges are on there. Yes, if you report it as fraud, they'll do an investigation. Usually what they'll do in either case is they'll do a temporary credit back, do an investigation. If indeed they determine, yeah, it's fraud, then they'll remove those charges. Under the law, there are certain degrees of responsibility that you can have. Really, the most important thing is just be checking your accounts often and report it if there's anything you don't recognize right away. It's really important you do that. You have a little bit more time with a credit card than you have it with a debit card. And if you report it timely, I think it's like $50, I think, is what you're limited to, but almost always the major banks will just kind of write it off. If you don't report it timely, then you might be stuck with it. So it's really important to always be checking those on that. If you can't use a credit card, not everyone is eligible to get a credit card. Not everyone wants to get a credit card. There might be lots of reasons why you don't have a credit card. Then you might want to consider at least paying with cash in the most common areas that card numbers are skimmed, and that would be at restaurants. I love servers, but that's what the statistics show, is that sometimes there's skimmers used there when you put your card in the binder to pay it, or gas stations. Gas stations are actually quite common for them to find skimmers on there. It's not unusual for me to see reports, a news story that, they found skimmers at 3 gas stations in Osceola or Orange County. So it definitely happens. Don't save your Face ID or your login information to your banking account on your phone. Phones get misappropriated. Weird stuff happens. It's just not a good idea to do so. I know it's kind of a pain to type it in every time, but it's probably better, and 2-factor authentication, if you can, is always maybe a good idea on PayPal and, your banking apps and everything to kind of, make sure that you're putting on some extra protection to protect yourself. Again, avoid entering your PIN number if you can. Try to use your debit card as a credit card. There have been instances where there's a skimmer and a camera, so they're trying to line up all the data together. Scammers are smart. They like work really hard. I wonder what they could accomplish if they worked hard at something else. But they are constantly trying to think one step ahead. So, make sure that you are, you know, being careful. Again, I can't emphasize this enough to check your accounts frequently. We all, for the most part, have online banking these days. If not, at least look at your statement at the end of the month, and just make sure it's everything that you recognize. I know sometimes for me, when I'm looking on there, if it's like a pending transaction, sometimes it can look a little different than what I think it's ultimately going to look like, especially if you're traveling. But just kind of keep an eye on that. Check your credit reports often. Um, there's stuff like Credit Karma, which is okay. It's not how your Credit Karma takes data from two of the three major credit bureaus, and I don't remember which two off the top of my head at the moment, and compiles them into a report. It's not exactly the same as what you would see on your actual credit report, which you're actually entitled to once per week through April due to the pandemic. And then after that, one copy of each of the three major every 12-month period. So what some people will say, we'll get one quarter one, or one, in January, 4 months later, and 4 months after that. So you're always getting different credit reports. I kind of keep an eye on my credit in a couple different ways. My credit card offers my credit score, and more now. Actually, it actually has more information on there now, but at the time I first started using this credit score. So if my credit score changed and I didn't know why, that might be something I need to look into. Like if I didn't open a new account, or something like that, it has little variations from time to time, but if there were major changes, I would know that would be something I needed to do. And if you know that your identity has been compromised, you probably are going to want to put a credit freeze on your credit. There's a resource later on that I link, but it basically does that, and fraud alerts too, and I'm going to get into that a little bit more. If you get a collection letter or a phone call from something you don't know about, but they have your name and your information, you may want to make sure that you are, checking that and making sure that there's no issues. So, just don't ignore it. It could be something that somebody used your identity. It could be a mistaken identity. I've seen that before. Or it could be something else. So, it's always good just to kind of keep an eye on it. Don't ignore stuff. Do not carry your Social Security card in your wallet. I can't tell you how many times someone comes into our office to get a notary, and one of the notaries will see their Social Security card as they're going for their license to do notary. It's not a good idea. Wallets go missing. And if you have your Social Security card and your driver's license or state ID in your wallet, that you basically have given someone the code to basically use your credit and you to do lots of things that they shouldn't do. And file your taxes early. One of the ways that you can prevent someone from misappropriating your taxes is to actually file them early. The earlier the better. A lot of students really just have their W-2s. You should have received them by now, and hopefully get that filed as soon as you can. And so that gives scammers less of an opportunity to use your information. I don't see any questions, but remember, you guys can drop them in the chat and I will do my best to answer them. So if you get your credit report and you're like, oh my God, what is this? Not every error means that your identity has been compromised. 1 in 5 people have an error on their report, but probably only a small amount is actually true identity theft. These are large databases. They make mistakes. It happens. So a lot of times is what they call a mismerged file, especially if you have a common name. So I use some examples. My best friend's name is Anthony Smith, and we've been out places and dealt with people, and we've run into other people named Anthony Smith. So it's not like an uncommon name, or a family name. So junior, senior, we see that a lot, especially if you have like common areas you've lived in a family home or something of that nature. Then sometimes they'll think it's you and it's not you. And then sometimes people aren't sure what something is because what they think it is or how you use it is not actually how it shows up on your credit report. So a lot of times we'll see that with store credit cards, because store credit cards are issued by Kohl's or Victoria's Secret or wherever. And they say that on them, but they're not usually, there's like another bank behind it. Very often it's Synchrony Bank or Comenity. Those are two really big ones that do that. And so you'll typically see that as being on the credit report as that bank. And then some sort of other notation that kind of helps you figure out which store it is. It'll be all sorts of abbreviated. And sometimes I'm guessing to try to figure it out, but that could show up on a report like that. So a lot of these things, if it's not really you, disputes can happen. I've seen that happen with an international student who wasn't even in the country when the debt was actually incurred. So it does happen. So I'm going to talk a little bit more here about the fraud alerts versus credit freezes. These are two things that you can do if you're worried about identity theft to help protect yourself. So a fraud alert is when you put a notation on your credit report. So typically when I'm talking about credit reports, in this context, I'm going to be talking about the big three credit reports, which is TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. But there are actually other credit reports. They're actually called consumer reports under the law, and those can be used for other purposes. But for here, I'm talking mainly about what we call the big three. You can contact them and say, hey, put a fraud alert on there. And there's two different types. At any time, you can put a fraud alert on your credit. And you can do that, and it lasts for 1 year. It automatically goes away after a year. If you've been a victim of identity theft, you can put an enhanced fraud alert on, and that stays for 7 years. Typically, you need a police report and stuff like that to do that. So that's kind of where kind of those things stand for that. And basically what it means when you have that on there is that lenders need to take extra steps to verify who you are before they extend a loan. So if someone was trying to use your identity to take out a credit card, for example, they're supposed to use extra steps to verify that it was you. Credit freezes are a little bit different. And basically what that does is you can put it on, you contact the big three, and there's a guide that I link to later that walks you through how to do this step by step. And you ask them to freeze your credit. And that is on there until you thaw your credit. And so it stops people from even accessing your information to extend credit unless you thaw it. So it's really, really good at preventing identity theft, but it also is kind of a pain because if you do need to take out a loan or do anything, with your credit, you have to thaw it. It's not necessarily a long process, but there is some time frames involved. And so if you were, for example, thinking about buying a new car or something of that nature, you would have to keep that in mind so that, you have that ready for yourself when you do that. Both of these are free and they don't affect your credit score. So you can definitely do it at any time that you want to. Some people are like, just freeze your credit. Everybody should have their credit freeze. And maybe that, if you're someone who would impulsively get a store credit card when maybe you shouldn't, maybe that is a good thing to do. It definitely makes you plan a little bit more or impulsively buy a car. succumb to pressure, maybe that is a good thing. But it is an extra step. So what do you do if your ID has been compromised? If it's debit or credit card charges, report to your bank as soon as possible. A lot of times now you can do that through an app, or you can give them a call, and kind of get that process going. You may have to sign an affidavit that it was indeed fraud. And if that's the case and you need a notary, we have notaries in our office available for you. So you can always do that. If your identity has otherwise been compromised, file a police report. They might not do a whole lot because they might not be able to find it. And a lot of those can either be done online, or you can call the non-emergency number of the police department to do that. You can request that fraud alert, to put that on your credit report. Excuse me, my brain froze there for a second. And you can contact the companies that have fraudulent accounts. And, if this happens to you, or if you think it's happened to you, you can definitely come in and talk to one of us to have us help you take care of that. If that becomes an issue for you, we hope that that is not ever going to be an issue for any of our nights, but it does happen. So I'm going to transition now to scams, and because I'm not seeing any questions, again, drop them in the chat if you have any questions. This is actually what we see the most of for students, and it can be pretty significant when we do see it. But there's usually some things in common when I see a scam or I hear of a scam. And the window dressing, as I like to say, or the fact scenario or whatever it is, can be different, but there usually are some like core commonalities to it that can be a tip off that it's a scam. One is asking for payment and gift cards. That's like the number one way. The FTC just released, I think 2 days ago, sometime within the last week, a bunch of stats about all of the fraud alerts that they received, or fraud reports that they received last year. And gift cards was like a huge, I think like the top way that people got defrauded. And so know that no one's asking for payment gift cards. The reason why they ask for gift cards is because they can get the number and the PIN from you and spend it and be gone. And nobody knows how to, it's very hard for you to get anybody to track them down. Beware of anyone calling you, or that's the number one way, again, from those FTC statistics. And then texting and email are the 2 and 3, I believe, from a place looking for payment or other info. If it is someone you do business with or have a concern about, hang up and call a known number. Look them up. Let's say it's Spectrum, and they're saying you owe us money. Hang up. Look up the number for Spectrum and then call Spectrum and inquire about your account. And don't think you guys know spoofing happens. Like, I've been called from my own number before, so all the time. So even if it looks legit, it might not be legit. So if it's something you have no idea about and you're just getting a call out of nowhere, that's definitely what we recommend. Do not use your bank account for other people. This is one we see quite a lot of, either to cash a check or to use your account for business transactions, like you got a job and they want to use your account to move money through. Do not do that. The reason why the check cashing scam is one we see quite often, where someone is like, I need, can you cash this check for me? And I'll let you keep a portion of it, or I hired you for a job and I'm going to send you this check. And part of it's for you, but I'm going to need part of it back. The reason for that is because most of the time, most banks are going to make the funds available to you within 24 to 48 hours, but that doesn't mean that the funds have cleared. And usually what happens is that You get the money, you give them the portion, you keep a portion, and then it turns out it's a fraudulent check and it bounces. And then all that money is taken back plus a fee. Walmart, Amscot, Publix, lots of places cash checks. No one needs you to cash check for them. It's not a high fee. And they can get that done. So they don't need you. And your employer does not need you to accept funds and spend funds. They have commercial accounts for that. And if there is an employer doing that, they're not doing what they should be doing, which is probably a red flag for working for them. So, don't do it. It's gone wrong so many times for people, really, really badly at sometimes. And if that happens and you go negative in your bank account, all the money you had in there is gone. And then if you don't pay it back to the bank, they're going to close your account. And then there's another consumer report. It's considered a credit report that's used by banks. And you won't be able to get an account anywhere else, and you'll become what's called unbanked, and it becomes very difficult to do business if that happens. So try to avoid that. And some smaller banks will actually even go after you for the negative amount. We've seen it. Just try not to put yourself in that situation. These people are persuasive. They have good stories. That's why this stuff works. Don't conduct business with Venmo, Cash App, Zelle. Those are developed to send money to people you know. They're not developed to send money to strangers, because once you send money, you guys know it's gone. And there's no way to get your money back. It's not like PayPal, which can help you get your money back in some circumstances, or paying with a debit or credit card. It's like burning cash. So only use it for those people that you know. With the real estate market and rentals becoming more and more expensive, I don't know how many articles I've seen recently about rentals. And we know most of you guys rent. It's really possible that we might see a rise in rental scams. So if someone is advertising something that sounds too good to be true, take a hard look at it. Bring it to us to look at it before you sign anything. We can help look through property records and try to make sure that this is a legitimate thing before you give any money or sign anything. One hallmark is, they say, is if the ad has pictures that don't seem to match up with the house or unit that you're renting, like it's just doesn't match at all at the unit that's at that address. Sometimes what you'll see is like oddly phrased English, like the person who might have placed the ad is not a native English speaker. I oddly phrase English, even though I'm a native English speaker. But that sort of thing, it might indicate that it's not legit. So, just be careful. And that's why we're here to review leases before you sign them. If someone's giving you a hard sale using, that's what scammers do. They try to prey on your emotions. They try to make you fearful that something's going to happen, or sad, or, empathetic with them for some reason. Really make sure that you're taking a step back and being cautious, in kind of thinking critically before you do these things, because it's much easier to avoid being scammed than trying to get your money back from being scammed. We have seen a lot of things here. I won't say we've seen it all, because there's always something new. But it's often difficult, if not impossible, to get your money back after it's gone, because we just don't even know where these people are. And then during 2021, from those statistics that I was talking about earlier, from the FTC, actually it shows that people in their 20s lose money 41% of the time that they encounter a fraud. So it's less money than older folks. Older folks usually lose a lot more money, but you guys in some ways are more susceptible to potentially losing money from scams. So that's why it's so important to be skeptical and be cautious where you put your financial information and stuff like that, because we do see some pretty high numbers. The average is about $500 for the 250 to 500 for the student type age group, or typical, student type age group, but it's I've seen a lot more than that. So some common scams. I talked a little bit about this earlier, but it's employment based, or someone's hard up, really needs your help to cash a check for them. The soft clearance happens, but checks take about 14 days to hard clear. So if there's ever a check you get that you're a little suspicious of, you might want to wait that full amount of time before you use the money. Another employment scam that I saw not all that long ago involved someone receiving Zelle transfers to their account and then using that money to buy crypto. And then, someone alleged that someone had gotten into their account and it actually wasn't them who did those Zelle transfers. So that was all credited back and was a big mess. And we have no idea where those people are now. And, the money was gone. We've seen some where someone agreed to cash the check and then for someone, and then the person strong-armed them into giving up their phone, and they used their facial ID to get into their account, do all sorts of stuff that the person didn't consent to, and just had been put into a very precarious situation for their safety. So it's just not something you necessarily want to do. We see a lot of employment scams around now, especially with like remote work and all of that sort of stuff. So just be cautious. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Rental scams, not just the people who are listing a house and don't have any or access to it, but we've also seen someone who was a previous tenant whose lease was coming to an end, claiming that they were an agent for the landlord renting out the house. We've seen people who were hired to clean houses, pretend that they're real estate agents and rent out houses. And in the meantime, you put down a security deposit, maybe first month, last month's rent, or something, and now the real property owner is coming and wants you to get out. So make sure that you're definitely looking into everything before you sign the lease. Property appraiser's website is always a good idea to check and see who actually owns the property, just by the address. It's usually fairly easy with a few exceptions. Occasionally there's like a weird address that is not all that easy to find. But it's usually pretty good. And again, we review leases, so you can always bring them to us. International students, unfortunately, we do see our international students threatened with either ICE or the Customs and Border Patrol. And understandably, can understand why that would be the case. And, it's just keep in mind, gift cards, cash, that's not a legitimate form of payment that government entities ask for if there is an issue, for prosecution, stuff like that, that they're not asking for that sort of payment. So that's a huge red flag. And if you were in that situation, international or domestic student, you weren't sure, you can always come and talk to us. Again, threats of warrants for your arrest. Sometimes you missed jury duty. That's one that goes around sometimes. And we'll see that, and that kind of, makes people upset and, do that. So you can definitely see the pressure ones that are used, imposter scams, they're sometimes called. Stuff like the IRS never is going to call you. They do not call people as a preliminary matter. They put stuff in good old fashioned USPS snail mail to wherever the address is on your W-2s. They're not going to be, you know, calling you. And that's a big one that goes around, especially this time of year through like tax time. People will see that as well. So, just be careful with that sort of thing. Some resources that I have for you guys, and again, I'll take questions. Happy to take questions. Is the Taxpayer Guide to ID Theft. You can find that on the IRS website. To be honest with you, surprisingly, the IRS has a pretty good website for answering questions if you have tax questions. At least to get you started. Obviously, as your situation gets more and more complex, you might want to consult with a tax professional. But for some basic questions, they actually do have pretty good information that even I can understand, and I am not tax minded at all on there. FTC's consumer resources. So the FCC has a lot of really good information on their website, along also with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Probably should add that to this list. As far as if you've been a victim of identity theft, scams, the FTC takes reports of scams. The FBI also does through the IC3, if it's computer-based, to kind of track things. They also have brought some enforcement actions against like Western Union and other money wiring services to try to get people's money back in some circumstances if they've been a victim of fraud. I haven't seen that used though for scams in probably 5 years. It's been a while, but it could circle back around. Who knows? And they also put out alerts of different reports that they're seeing with different scams. We do too on our website or on our socials, mostly Facebook and Twitter, but we are getting more Instagram savvy for that sort of stuff. So, we do try to put some information out there if we've seen something going through our community, so you guys know. And then Clark Howard, you guys probably don't know who Clark Howard is. Honestly, I didn't know either until somebody told me about him. He had been on NPR for many years. It's kind of like a financial guru. I don't agree with all of his advice necessarily all the time, or all the advice that's put out by his crew, but it's pretty good. And he has a really nice credit freeze guide to kind of walks you through how to do credit freezes and thaws that I think is better than anything else I've ever seen. So that is out there for you if you choose to look those up. And I think the FTC has some information about the fraud alerts if you go on their consumer FTC website. They have a lot of really great information. All right, questions. To wrap things up, it was your final kind of opportunity to ask questions. So for those of you who don't know, our office is in the Student Union, room 304. We're by the game room, back off that lounge where the microwaves are. We're open 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. We do notaries on a walk-in basis, but everything else for attorney services is by appointment only. We do in-person appointments as well as phone and Zoom consultations. I guess we could do Teams, but typically Zoom, a little bit easier for everybody to use. And so that is available for you. check out the rest of the videos on our channel. We have a lot of content, and consider subscribing. It does help us out. It's my influencer section of the video, I guess. We do appreciate that. We don't put a ton of stuff out, so we're not going to be spamming you guys. So you know that's kind of out there for you. And then next week, we'll be participating in Safe Night Week, and that starts with the carnival on Monday, and that's from 10 to 2 on Memory Mall. We will have some of our Keep Calm and Call Your Lawyer t-shirts. They are starting to become limited edition at this point. So if you want one of those, that might be your last opportunity to get one. Later in the week from 11 to 2 on Thursday, we'll be back on Memory Mall, and we'll be talking about credit reports and how to get one and how to read it. So if you're interested in that, definitely stop by. Again, if you want to take the survey, letting me know you were here, just in case there's any issue that you were here today. I would have that record of it. Otherwise, like I said, I have no idea who's here. So one downside to doing virtual presentations. And then we will have some more presentations coming out on our channel and for the rest of the semester. So sometime in March, keep an eye out. We're going to be doing some stuff about contracts, talking about if you are a student athlete and doing an NIL contract, or a social media influencer, or really anybody who would be looking at doing self-employment. Some things to look for in contracts. The link is in the description below, just below where I talk about the event. It's a Qualtrics link. It should be there. I'll double check afterwards just to make sure. There might be a Google form to fill out for lead attendance, but I don't have it. If anybody knows about it, let us know if you could. And so we'll be doing that sometime in March. And then I also know that we'll be doing some information with Sensible Nights about how your credit could affect your ability to get a job. All right. So I don't see any questions. So with that, thank you very much, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and hopefully see you soon.